Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where I've been watching way too much news and learning how three-word slogans seem to be repeated again and again and again to help sway people or get everybody on board. The first time I noticed this was in America when a few years ago, probably 5 years ago now, isn't it, with the whole build the wall, which seemed to be repeated by every politician and every news channel. And over here in the UK, we had Get Brexit Done, where every single politician, every single news report would feature the phrase "Get Brexit Done." But here in the UK at the moment, the three-word slogan appears to be "Stay at home," after a crazy number of people were seen outside supermarkets like zombies and queuing to climb a mountain. Absolutely crazy times right now. But hey, we are living in weird times, but I am grateful that we have each other. And today, I invited Douglas Ferguson onto the podcast to join us, and he's the founder of a company called Voltage Control, and he's also the author of a book called Beyond the Prototype, which outlines everything companies need to know before, during and after conducting a design sprint. Now, I am aware that we've got people listening from a variety of industries and a variety of backgrounds, so if you're thinking, well, what are design sprints? Why are design sprints valuable? When should teams even think about conducting a design sprint? And for those that know all the answers to those questions, is there any tips for running a successful design sprint? And what do you do with all that information after the design sprint is over? Whichever stage of that journey that you are at, I'm convinced Douglas should be able to give you some answers today. So come with me all the way to Texas so we can speak with Douglas Ferguson right now. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Douglas. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, my name is Douglas Ferguson, and I'm the founder and president of Voltage Control. We're a workshop agency. We help teams come together to solve problems and explore new challenges. And a lot of our work's been shifting virtually due to the nature of the spread of COVID-19, and that's been a fascinating transition lately. Ultimately, I guess if you boil it all down, we just help people make better decisions together and have better meetings.
So we will have people listening from a variety of backgrounds and different industries. So just to ensure everyone is on the same page here, could you just tell me a little bit more about exactly what design sprints are?
Absolutely. The design sprint was created at Google by a good friend of mine, Jake Knapp. He was at the time working on Gmail and had a side project. You know, the Google folks have this 20% time thing, and the way it goes is you can choose anything that you're interested in, or any kind of opportunity to innovate or learn. You can go explore those things with 20% of your time, as long as you spend 100% of your time working on what you're assigned.
And what is it that's so valuable about design sprints, especially for businesses, do you think?
Yeah, well, ultimately Jake set out to design the perfect week. And he noticed that as he was working on this side project, which was Hangouts, which is now Google Meet, which a lot of people are probably using now with all the work from home requirements. And the team was distributed, and they met regularly, a few times a month, and couldn't really get in person that often. And they had an opportunity to get together in person. And so Jake sat down and designed out the time together and thought about some of the dynamics of group meetings and how they made progress and when things happened and when they didn't. And he noticed they got a lot more done that week. And so he started to gain this hypothesis around why certain things don't work, our normal defaults, and how they don't serve us well. And he started to design those things out. And so really it's the design sprint is really focused at getting us away from these normal meeting defaults and kind of putting us in a room together for a week so that we can get past some of these things and make quick decisions. And so you couple that with the fact that it's actually a greatest hits or best practices for lean, agile, and design thinking. And so you come out with this kind of like real appreciation for what it means to really listen to customers.
And I think one of the few plus points of this global pandemic that we've got at the moment is we are moving away from those meeting defaults. We've been forced to. So many people working remotely now. But when should teams conduct design sprints, do you think? Is there a particular point in the process?
Yeah, I think the thing is the thing you really want to watch out for is just being in search of a time to run a design sprint. It's really should be more around you're stuck, or there's some big opportunity and maybe a big project, and you really want to get that thing started with a lot of momentum. Then absolutely use a design sprint. But I think where people get in trouble is where they're like thinking that, this design sprint thing is so awesome, I need to go do one. When am I going to do it? And that's just a solution looking for a problem. I do want to come back to that point around the pandemic, though. I do agree there's a lot of opportunity where this is creating this kind of need for folks to reinvent how they work. But I also think that we need to be very intentional and very careful, because I'm seeing a big shift of people just taking those same behaviors and just putting them online. And that's really evident of conferences. Right? When people say, we can't meet in person, so let's have a virtual conference. Well, just recording your conference and throwing it up on a Zoom webinar is not delivering the same experience. It's not even close to the same experience. And I doubt it's in spirit of your purpose. There was a reason why you decided to create this event, this conference, and really focusing on that purpose and the experience you want to drive for your attendees will lead to much more interesting experiences that you can develop. So instead of letting the tools or the defaults dictate the experience, think about what you could deliver, where there could be some more value add experience, and then design from there, and then figure out how to accomplish that with the tools.
And I'm curious, as someone that has obviously got great experience in design sprints, is that something that you're carrying on, and is it easy to do remotely?
I wouldn't necessarily say easy to do. None of this stuff is easy online. I mean, it's easy to fire up Zoom and have a meeting.
Yeah.
But that's a lot different than delivering results, especially when you're talking about a week-long workshop that involves a cross-functional team that's getting after maybe a potentially contentious problem. And so there's some things that you have to keep in mind when running virtual events, and we've been experimenting and diving deeper and deeper into what all these issues are, because even translating our meeting mantras into virtual, there's some work that had to be done, and things like timing are a concern. Things like access are a concern. Typically in an in-person workshop, we're not going more than 90 minutes before we let people take a break. Online and virtual, you tend to have more frequent breaks, even if it's just a mini break where you tell people to turn off their cameras and stretch and just stand up and disconnect for a minute. You have to really think about the fact that you might still do some work solo at your desk, and then do some work with the group through some sort of online collaboration tool. But just trying to jam it all into one system or one tool can be problematic. And I see people falling into that problem quite often. And so whether it's timing or how you use the tools, or kind of the arc or sequence, ways that you have to change your behavior around how you read the room, because in a real live room, if someone's disconnected, confused, or upset, or starting to withdraw, you can detect that pretty quickly, even if it's subliminal. You might just get your spidey sense might be going off. That doesn't happen virtually. And so you have to just really lean in and pay attention to that. And often we'll bring extra facilitators. So we'll have a content facilitator, so someone who's leading the discussion and guiding, another person that's paying more attention to time and the tools, and also can help pick up on some of those things, like just watching how much a cursor is moving around, and that might indicate that someone's kind of disconnected or not as involved. And so it's interesting because often I'll hear have these conversations, and folks will assume that virtual is going to be cheaper because it's not in person. And I found it to be opposite. It requires more attention, more planning, and even more live facilitators than in person. It is less travel, but it certainly is definitely more work.
And I'm curious, once a design sprint is over, what happens to all that information that's being gathered typically?
Yeah, so it's fascinating because you've got several different outcomes. You've got the questions and insights that you've gained. So you probably answered some questions that you asked during the sprint. So we'll ask some on problem framing day, and then we'll also ask some prototype questions as we're building the prototype and starting the test on Friday. So then coming out of Friday, when we've interviewed all our testers, we'll have tons of insights, and we'll typically iterate on that some. So we'll start to gather even deeper insights, and it'll help us potentially kind of pivot or go into adjacent areas or just further refine our idea. And so I typically refer to it, there's about 3 different outcomes, and one of them is a slam dunk. So you totally nailed it. You should totally go build whatever you were concepting because everyone loved it, and they're just like literally breaking out their wallets during the interview. That very rarely happens. Usually it's a flawed win, and a flawed win means you're kind of headed in the right direction, but you got some insights that are going to help you reposition or kind of iterate or make changes, adapt it. And then the other outcome is the failure. And the failure is interesting because more than likely we would have gone and built this thing, and this allowed us to discover that that's not what we should do, and we should completely pivot. And maybe the insights gave us some awareness of things that we might want to go explore that we weren't even thinking about previously. And then on top of that, the prototype is a living, breathing document. So that is something that we can continue to iterate on and grow and continue to learn from customers, whether or not it's, on this specific idea or something that builds upon it or something that lives beside it. And then there's other concepts and how might we's and ideas that percolated. There's a lot of alignment that's built all around the team. So we can lean on that alignment. We have advocates that are now going out and throughout the organization. These kind of cultural, I call it the sprint mindset in the book, cultivating the culture. And so that's an amazing benefit that we get out of a design sprint that we can kind of come back to and rely on and benefit from over time. And then those things that were generated during the design sprint, you can come back to those as well and harvest those how might we's and ideas for future projects. And so there's quite a few benefits from this work. And I mean, anytime you bring a team together that's diverse and focused on an important challenge or goal, and you've got the structure to keep them aligned and accomplishing things, then really amazing stuff can happen. And we just don't do enough of that in corporate America. So many meetings are status reports or just going through the same old motions, when I think that we can actually start to do more meaningful work if we do the work in the meeting.
And I also think it's worth highlighting, you've got a great book out called Beyond the Prototype. Can you tell me a little bit more about that book and ultimately how it can help anyone who might have struggled to move that key innovation project forward at work, how it might be able to help them?
Absolutely. I started to notice this trend of after a design sprint, so many teams struggle to kind of take all that awesome momentum and turn it into something that was tangible and really impactful to the organization. They were still benefiting from some of these adjacent and indirect impacts, but weren't necessarily getting to that revenue potential that they saw from talking to these people. And I started to dig into it, and I experienced it myself. But I thought, hey, we just didn't quite know what we were doing. We were still learning the design sprint. This is even before the book came out, and started to just research and look at more and more of my customers, people at the Google Sprint conference, et cetera. And all this research, I noticed that there's this consistent trend of people just really struggling to maintain that momentum. And there's a bunch of reasons. And I started to capture this stuff into the book, and I wanted to focus on a conversation around this and provide a bit of a guide for after the design sprint, because the design sprint is such a great checklist and of what to do to kind of spur this ideation and get it tested, and then say, okay, what are we going to do next? And the Agile and Scrum and these things are such great processes that detailing exactly step by step how to actually build and deliver software. But what is the gap? How do we fill that gap? So then I started to realize that it's not just design sprints. It's anytime we concept or come up with ideas. How do we fill that gap between we have this idea, we kind of have some indications, validation that it's the right thing, but how do we get it prepped up and ready to actually go build it? And there's a lot of work to do there. And so that was the focus point of this. And I've been continuing to do workshops and learn more and more about how people are faced with this problem and how to address it. And it's I've found it to be very pervasive.
And I suspect we will have people listening all over the world that will have all struggled to move that problem forward or that innovation project forward. So for those people, do you have any success stories of businesses where design sprints have actually really helped and made a big difference?
Oh, yeah. Well, Jake's book is full of them. The Blue Bottle Coffee is a really great one. That's one of my favorite ones, actually, because they... the way that they learned from the tests with the users, and this notion that even the language they were using didn't resonate with the users. And that's one of those things that you just wouldn't detect with clickstream analytics, like maybe sales wouldn't be as great as you wanted. And sure, you might adjust some copy and things, but really hearing how the language that users use, and then just basically taking that and repackaging it and using it in your marketing versus saying the things in the ways that you think they should be said. And so with them, the specifics were they were using coffee industry language, and they found that when their users, when they were talking to these people, showing them this prototype packaging, they realized that the people were using kind of wine language. So language you would usually associate with how wine tastes and how you might purchase a good bottle of wine. And so they just wholesale adopted that style of talking, and it was very effective. And so that's an amazing win. Another fun story is the Savvy Oak robot, and they were testing the robot delivery service for hotels, and they were really worried about that first interaction. And they ended up introducing a little dance that the robot did, and it tested very well with people and gave them the confidence to implement it. Because at first they were really worried that something like that would come across as creepy or dumb or whatnot. And so this really gave them an opportunity to understand if it delighted people, if there's desirability for it. Sure. So similarly, we did a design sprint with AARP to help them design a solution for caregivers who were, working with or taking care of people that had life-threatening diseases or health conditions. And we wanted to create events and opportunities for them to just kind of have some self-care opportunities. And so we prototyped these experiences using 3D renderings, and then we had table tents and printouts, and the games they would be playing at these events, and the marketing materials they might run into at the pharmacy, etc. And was able to sit down with these individuals and learn a lot about how they spend their time and how they think about any time they might have away from the person they take care of. So it's super insightful and allowed them to really dial in the offering. And they went on to create the event, and it was very successful. And that personally was one of the more rewarding things we've worked on, just knowing that, these individuals they dedicate their lives to taking care of others. And now we were able to help design something that, help them out.
And again, I'm incredibly curious, what kind of shifts in mindsets and bonding do teams generally just experience during that short time together? Because a week is a short amount of time, but it sounds like there's a lot of big changes go on in that time.
Yeah, again, it's a lot of it's the shift from those defaults, and it's also time constrained, and so we're put people a bit into a pressure cooker, if you will, and kind of force them to make quick decisions. And so one of the things is typically we're in endless debate, and it's just circular conversations, and well, let's table that and come back to it. Well, that's why a week seems like a short amount of time, because typically we take forever to do things. And so if we put in these kind of rules and the structure and say we're going to make quick decisions, and we make decisions, we can see so much progress happening so quickly. And I think that in itself is that one of the things that creates so much of the momentum with design sprints. And I think that feeling is very addictive, and it can change behavior if people really pay attention to it and really want to attempt to do these things. Another thing is this notion of quick and dirty data. So the design sprint is about capturing quick and dirty data, and we're going to make some decisions based on that quick and dirty data, rather than what's typically happens is before we're in a position where we can collect a ton of data. And let's face it, no matter how big your company is, if it's a brand new project, you probably will not have the ability to collect a lot of data about this project because it's brand new. And so from that point of time of inception up until you get to some inflection point, you are operating off of a hunch. And so the design sprint says, well, instead of using a hunch, let's use some quick and dirty data and make decisions off that quick and dirty data, even though we know it's not statistically significant, it's not quantitative, it's qualitative, but it will help point us and steer us a bit so that we're at least it's the least better than the hunch. Another thing is typically we rely on things like brainstorming, which basically, even if we don't call it brainstorming, we get together, we talk about ideas, and someone gets passionate enough to actually push their idea a little bit further, and they go and they make a prototype. And when we talk about prototypes, we just mean anything that resembles the future state. So if you're a designer, you might actually mock up some screens that basically demonstrate what the vision or what you think it could be. If you're a product manager or business person, you might go make a PowerPoint presentation that kind of shows the future state. Or maybe if you're an engineer, maybe you build some flow charts, or you hack up a quick little mini app that kind of proves out the interaction. And then you show that to the team. And when you show that thing to the team, a lot of the other ideas just dissipate because now this thing's gotten more concrete. But the thing is that, and so because your thing is concrete, the other ideas dissipate. Everyone starts to focus on the thing that you've made because it's clear, it's coherent, and we're already seeing some momentum around it. And the design sprint instead says, well, instead of that brainstorming and relying on the one person that took initiative, why don't we give everybody like equal footing and give everyone the tools and the structure to push their idea forward in a concrete way so that we can all place our bet on the thing that we think is going to push us forward the furthest and provide the most value for the company.
And as someone who is in the business of running design sprints, plus innovation workshops and digital transformation initiatives, how are you dealing with the challenges caused by the coronavirus global pandemic at the moment? Because I know it's something that's affecting every business and every employee in every corner of the world. But how is it affecting you?
Gosh, I've been home for 12 days now, and I usually fly quite a bit out to clients for design sprints, and my last trip a few weeks ago was to Tampa for a big workshop of about 100 people for United States Special Operations Command, and so those things have been put on hold. Any public gatherings, so we've pivoted mostly virtual. I've spent the time to really think about the dynamics behind virtual gatherings and workshops, and it really does change quite a few principles. but many of them stay the same. We just have to think about how we adapt them. And our focus has really been around the purpose and the intent behind the gathering and making sure that we stay true to that rather than just throwing it online. I see so many conferences just saying, oh, let's just record some video and throw it up. And I think you really lose the true nature of the experience if we don't spend some time really thinking about the purpose and driving through to create an experience that honors that purpose. And so we've been doing a lot of work there. We've before things got really out of hand here, and I think we were still in the sub 10 kind of numbers in the U.S., and we hosted a workshop to explore, how we might behave or adjust behavior during South by or any public event. So convene the community to start this conversation. And then I just thinking along those terms, we've been hosting public workshops, and now we host them virtually to explore these conversations. And just last week, we were exploring the future of facilitation. So how these changes are impacting how we facilitate. And this week, we're going to be doing a workshop that's a virtual workshop, free for the community. And now it's a global community, which is pretty exciting. I really like the fact that that's the silver lining of all this is that it's really focused me to think about not just the Austin community, but the global community. We have our yearly conference, and that draws people from around the world. But now weekly, we can host a global conversation, which I think is really fantastic. And we've been looking at how we can bring everyone together and give them a voice. So instead of it being a one-mini presentation like a webinar, we're having a many-to-many conversation. So everyone has a voice, and we collect that up and synthesize it. So usually we'll have a workshop where we'll have around 200 or more people, and then we'll take the outputs and then synthesize those down and then release a blog post the week after. So that's really been the stuff on my mind lately, and continuing to just think about how we hone the craft, and also been helping people with the transition from to remote work, because for all the companies that are great at it and have been doing it, there's many that are forced into it for the first time or very reluctantly. And so helping them just not avoid simply just taking their desks, their office behaviors and pushing them virtually.
Incredibly cool what you're doing there. And for anyone listening that'd like to find out more information, could you just point them in the right direction of where they can find you online? And also, if they want to ask a member of your team a question, what's the best way of doing that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So you can find us at voltagecontrol.com, and you can reach us at hello@voltagecontrol.com.
Excellent. Well, like I said at the very beginning of this podcast, I think it's a great opportunity at the moment to think differently, work differently. And there's so many different opportunities around virtual workshops and virtual conferences. But I loved how you pointed out there that too many people have got those very bad habits from the office and bringing them into the world of remote work and just throwing everything online, which is not the answer. But there was just so much value and insights from you there, Douglas. So thanks so much for coming on and sharing that with us all today. Thanks again.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Now, design sprints are a week-long process to tackle unwieldy business problems to be successful. But to be successful, teams must have that laser focus on solving one specific problem. And my takeaway from this episode today is that during that design sprint, a team goes through a design thinking-based process to kind of uncover insights, prototype an idea, and test it with users. And that 1 week can bring a project to a new level, or actually go on to save months of time and resources. And the shifts in mindsets and bonding that teams experience during that incredibly short time together is incredibly valuable in changing how teams work. And ultimately, it helps companies to solve significant issues and become more innovative. But hey, that's what I took away from this. What did you learn? And do you have any insights or experiences from your own design sprints that you'd like to share with everyone listening today? Whatever it is, please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, my website, techblogwriter.co.uk, and all my social channels are at the bottom of the website. And you can also find over 1,100 other podcast interviews which should be more than enough to get you all through this global pandemic. And if it isn't, and you just want to ask me a question or talk to me, again, pop me a message. I'll gladly get on a Zoom call and have a quick chat with you as well and make sure we all come through this period together. But hey, I'm guilty of rambling now, so I'll see you again tomorrow with another guest. But until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.